It's been a little while since we've shown off a Walther on the channel, and now we've got the WMP. That's right, the Walther that's a little bit different because it's chambered in 22 Magnum. This is an interesting pistol that's got quite a few different features to it. I have some theories as to where it might be a good fit. I'd love to hear what you guys think about this gun. But first, let's take a look. Coming up next on GBGuns. Opening up our classic Walther hard case. We've got the gun in a baggie. It did come with a Walther chamber flag in it. However, at the gun shop, this was a popular topic, so it's already out. One magazine in the gun, a second magazine, and these magazines are beefy. They've got some heft to them. 15 rounders. Then in a separate bag here, we've got, well, we know Control 64, we don't know who you are, but if this gun has problems, we know it's your fault. The optics plates in here, as well as different rear sights and tools for swapping that out. Up top, we have our federally mandated trigger lock, Walther branded, and the manual. Let's take a look at this manual since this pistol's a bit different. Speaking of different, I did notice a couple things in this manual that were, I thought, interesting, such as the instructions to never cross obstacles such as fences or streams with a loaded firearm. I mean, that makes sense. You can see it right there. I just had never seen that as a safety warning before. But otherwise, that and the advice to to safely store the firearm with the hammer down, and also to not store it loaded, I thought was kind of interesting. And that's right, the WMP is hammer fired. The manual is your classic 4-color. Pretty straightforward. Nothing too crazy or different in here to be aware of. It does have a guide in there for your optics plates. As you can see, that covers most of the footprints that you might want to use. As far as specs, pricing, details, all that kind of stuff, head on over to the pinned comment or gbgunsdepot.com, our website. That's where we can post all that stuff safely, since YouTube doesn't like seeing it here on the channel. Let's take a look at this gun. So the WMP is a, well, I guess you could say compact-ish by old world standards, maybe full-size by modern standards, 22 mag hammer-fired pistol holding 15 + 1 rounds. Where would you use that? What is your application for that? That's a question that I had, especially when I first learned about this gun, which was actually a couple years back, especially because 22 Magnum was super rare and super expensive back then. However, I bought some in anticipation of this review and got this stuff for less than 9mm going for a box of 50. And guess what, for all you energy guys, 40 grains going at 1875 feet per second is about the same muzzle energy as most practice 9mm ammunition. So you're getting 9mm-like energy transfer, ideally with good projectiles, with a whole lot less recoil and less expensive ammunition. Kind of puts us in a neat spot. I think I could see it as something for a going quad and gun or ranch gun, something to use for self-defense if 9mm is too much for you. Because it's 22 Magnum, you've got a softer spring in there, making it easier to rack. So this is kind of a cool alternative that I really hadn't thought of before. As we take a look at the gun, you might have noticed that I used my middle finger to release the magazine. That's because this is a quad mag release pistol. We've got metal levers here, not plastic like I had on my P99, which I loved. It's where I learned that trick. And I liked that because rather than shift my grip to get my thumb to the magazine release, I could just lift there, and now my hand has remained in position on the pistol. But you've got paddles on both sides and push buttons on both sides. Kind of cool. Let's get back to our standard review. I'm going to do that by testing this slide lock. It works. Magazine in, and we look for magazine release or ejection. Looks like release. Let's try with the paddle. Yep, it's just going to be release, but these mags weigh an awful lot, so I don't think you're going to have any issues with them falling free, even though you've got polymer on polymer. In fact, I'm going to weigh this real quick, just for the heck of it. Here's a standard Walther PDP 15 round magazine coming in at 2.9 ounces. And am I an idiot? Nope. The WMP mag at 3.8 ounces is almost a full ounce heavier. So it is indeed a heavier magazine. Totally irrelevant, but kind of interesting. Sorry about the gun nerd tangent there. It's just I handle a lot of pistols, and I was impressed with how heavy this thing felt for being polymer. You can see it's got a actual steel body inside there to help keep everything nice. You also have these pull-down levers to make loading of rimmed cartridges a little bit easier. If you're not familiar with that, because 22 Magnum has, or Winchester Magnum, has a rim, it's possible to frustrate the stack by having the rim of the top cartridge behind the rim below. So doing this helps you make sure that you're not skipping over. More on that in the range video. Back to the WMP and our slide release. Oh, on this side. Come on. Nope. Does fail on that. Can we get on this? Nope. What's going on here? Interesting. It looks like it's a slide lock only and not a release. Maybe that will break in the range video. We'll see when we get out there. Big beefy gun. We've got nice sharp serrations on the slide, front and rear. Some lightning cut speed holes there, likely to help reduce weight so that when you throw the ounce to 2 ounces of red dot on there, you're not going to have cycling issues. Plenty of rail space underneath. Coming up front, you can see our big fat barrel with a little bit of a liner in there. We have a fiber optic front sight. Texturing on the front of the trigger guard for those who like to shoot it's more popular in Europe, but the European way with your support hand trigger finger up front there. Plenty of room underneath the trigger guard, which you can see is beyond radiused so that it can have room for these levers to fit in there. The texturing on this is reminiscent of the PPQ line, but feels a little sharper. I don't know, it's been a while since I've held a PPQ. No, it is indeed. I'm looking at one right now. This is a little more aggressive, I guess you could say. We have a little bit of beveling to the magazine well, but what I noticed and really like is this tail here. That tail is handy so that during a reload, you can bring up, index the mag, and shove in. Also prevents the meat of your palm, if you're like me and have large hands, from getting in the way of the magazine. So that's a nice touch there. We do not have interchangeable back straps on this. Interesting to see that on a Walther. On the back, you can see our hammer. We have a little bit of slide wobble and shiftiness. Since we're here, let's do some trigger talk. Now, as a hammer-fired gun, what does it have for a trigger? Well, we still have the safety dingus, which works. We've got very light take-up to a wall. A little bit of creep. A brake. Our reset. Longer than most Walthers, and takes us just in front of that wall. So a good, controllable, I would say reasonable trigger for the carry option. You can see blacked out rear serrated sight and fiber optic front sight. That's great. This will of course also be great with a number of optics. Next, let's field strip the WMP and take a look inside the gun. The WMP, as you might expect, comes apart somewhat familiar, somewhat not. We're going to lock the slide to the rear, rotate this lever downward, and then bring the slide all the way back, and it comes forward off the gun. And no need to pull the trigger, which is nice. Looking inside, you can see quite a beefy build. There's a lot of steel inside here. Also a lot of grit. This gun obviously got test fired, and rim fires are not exactly the cleanest things. Interesting that we've got a good solid connection between the two sides of the slide stop and slide release, but I was unable to get it to work from the other side. We'll take another look at that at the range. Sometimes these things just need a little bit of break-in time. Coming to our slide, we're going to add a little bit of pressure to our recoil spring and then bring it out. It's on a lightweight plastic guide rod, standard helical spring, and then the barrel comes out in one big chunk. You can see this kind of sled that it rides on, Looks like there's a polyurethane bumper. It's a very different design than one might expect, and an interesting hollowed feed ramp. That's really different. And this barrel weighs a ton. It's heavy. Take a look at our slide, which is rather lightweight, heavily greased here. You can see our trigger safety there, and plenty of dirt from the test firing. Reassembly is an inverse of the disassembly, and as I get it back together, I'll tell you about what's going to be in the range video. You'll see our absolute cold first shots through the gun. We start shooting once the camera's rolling. Basically all there is to it. Lock the side of the rear, rotate the lever back into place. It's not wanting to go. What if I did something wrong there? Everything appears to be in place and happy. We have a special What's for Dinner for this. I don't know if we've got 10 loads, but we do have a variety of 22 Magnum loads that we'll run through to see what it eats. Might try it on the spinner. As I said, this 40 grain 1875 feet per second is 9mm like energy. Okay, something's catching. All slid in place. Another slide back. I don't know why this isn't going. We'll do some practical accuracy shots, 5 shots from 7 yards. And then give you our concluding thoughts. I'm not sure what is going on here. When guns are different like this, I give it a try dry off camera first, and didn't have any issues then. But for some reason it's not going back together happily. Since this gun's been out for a while, I'm sure some of you know what's wrong and you're laughing at me. Feel free to go ahead and leave a comment explaining what's going on here. I'm going to reference the manual and see if I didn't miss a step. The manual tells me that reassembly is the reverse of disassembly, which is what I've done. So let's try again. There we go. Just needed a little bit of extra force there. Not sure what was going on. But I'm curious to hear from those of you who might own one of these already, if you know what was up with that. But now that it's back together, everything is working fine. Things are a little bit gummy from the factory grease. I always recommend that you, the regular gun owner, wipe that factory grease off and lube the gun properly. We, however, test them as they come out of the box as a worst case scenario, because that's what can happen to some consumers, and we want to see what's going to be going on. If we have issues, we'll wipe it down there on the range and then run it clean. But the ergonomics on this thing are spectacular. It's got that Walther feel. More aggressive grip texture than I'm used to, but feels pretty good in the hand. We'll see you guys in the range. Thanks for watching.